So we are live now, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Good evening, everyone.
So we
And
are live now, sir. Yeah. Okay.
good evening, everyone.
So we
And
are live now, sir. Yeah. Good evening.
good evening, everyone.
So
And
we are live. Am I audible?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, there was some glitch. I'm sorry. Okay, we'll start again. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Maati Samvaad. As many of you know, Maati is about more than just the buildings, it's about stories, the people, and the roots that bind them. Tonight, we aren't just talking about what gets conserved, but why and the personal journey of the man leading that change. Our guest today is often called the Heritage Man of Kashmir, but his story didn't start in an architecture studio. It started in the lanes of downtown Srinagar and moved through the corridors of power as the Director General of Tourism. For over 3 decades, he served as a bureaucrat, but after retiring in 2006, when most people choose rest, he chose to start a new life. He established the Jammu Kashmir chapter of Intech, fighting to save everything from the Mughal era to the Oud Canal in Dal Lake to the vernacular mud houses that define Kashmir's identity. He is the man who spearheaded the dossier that won the Kashmir the title of UNESCO Creative City in 2021. He bridges the gap between the tangible, our monuments, and the intangible, the craft and the culture that keeps them alive. Please welcome a custodian of memory and the warrior of Kashmir's identity, Mr. M. Saleem Beg. Welcome, sir, to Maati Samvaad, episode 1. Sir, you grew up in Shere Khas, downtown Srinagar. You have often described it as a place where craftspeople, scholars, and shrine keepers mingled freely. How did growing up in that specific ecosystem shape your understanding of what heritage actually means?
Thank you for this generous introduction. Well, downtown is something which is a later day construct. I can't map it because many people have not seen the kind of settlements and settings downtown was per se, but it was an area which was divided into mohallas. What is a mohalla? I mean, one has to go back in the history, in the heritage cities or traditional cities or cities of the country where these mohallas existed, and there was a focal point in a mohalla, a shrine, a temple, a mosque, or a monument, now around which habitation grew. And till the late 60s, even early 70s, this settlement was by and large in the same kind of a ecosystem in which it has grown. Who were the people who were living around these shrines or a mosque, whatever? They're essentially people who had traditional livelihoods, traditional skills, and there's a traditional economy. And what was the traditional skill and economy? It was essentially linked to handicrafts in case of Srinagar. So now downtown is a huge lot of us area. I'm only talking of the settings which downtown had as of that time, which I am talking about, is late 60s. Things changed very rapidly. Urbanization took over the city, but that was later. Earlier on, in that time frame, things had not changed much. Like I'll tell you, education was not something which was very prevalent in our city. We caught up slightly later in the education sector, like the rest of the country. So not every child would go to school or go to a school at a senior level. I was perhaps one of the luckier few who got that. Otherwise, who were you playing with? Who were you spending time with? And we, in Srinagar, we have a lot of time those days. Winters are harsh, but winters also are utilizing a lot of socialization because you remain indoors.
Yeah.
So it was mainly handicrafts like it was embroidery, there was shawls, there was some weaving. There was embroidery of this golden thread. My closest friends were two boys who were doing golden. We even had a Kozagar in Mohalla who was part of our football team. Kozagar is the person who extracts arak out of herbs. And the
Okay.
most popular one was the arak of roses, arak gulab. And he was also part of the whole gang around. So you at the setting up, you would know informally what's
Hmm.
happening to them, how happy or how not happy they were about what they have been doing. But that's the life which they had been assigned to. So that was the kind of atmosphere. I mean, not saying that you were doing something for intangible heritage because these terms of are later day
Right.
arrangements. Earlier on, we didn't talk about heritage in terms of heritage, in terms of the terminology which is being used. I mean, that's so in architecture. So these terminologies set in later, but earlier on, these settings gave rise to a, this, what you call in Urdu zehniyat, a mentality,
Yeah.
thinking, without knowing, and in a very informal and unobtrusive manner. And side by side, I would have thought, I don't know where we lost this way. During our school days, we had even in our education system references to arts and crafts, which vanished. I don't know how it vanished with the onset of technology from school books. We're talking about bigger things because we
Yeah.
talk about technologies, sciences, nothing wrong. In fact, that's needed, but some of the space was taken over by newer topics. But those days we would understand this setting because what we were doing was something which was happening even in school systems. So that's the
Yeah.
kind of a thing. It's nothing like downtown. It was a downtown comprising of many mohallas. You know, there were certain mohallas which were dedicated to single craft, like copper carving. There was one mohalla doing that. Paper mache, one huge habitation, again a mohalla, about 1,000 families doing the same thing. It was craft and craft and craft. Because that was the main employment besides the other important things. It was crafting. In fact, when you moved in the bazaar, what would you see? Shops?
Yeah.
Yes. There would also be a shop which had a golden thread, a shop which had a colored silk yarn, a shop which was selling implements and fixtures of handlooms. So like that. So you were in an atmosphere in which you just absorbed it as part of your life. That is the point I was making.
Yeah. So you didn't study architecture formally. You were a student of literature and a civil servant. Was there a
And
specific moment or a specific building during your time as DG tourism that made you think, if I don't save this, no one will?
well, now that you are talking about, I believe it happened slightly before the I went to tourism department. I was with the handicrafts, and then I was working with the Department of Industries, and handicrafts was part of the Department of Industries. I don't think it arrived at that point in time. It must have been somewhere in my mind. But the provocation, as you rightly say, was a building.
Yeah.
What happened in when was it? 2000 or 99, I think 99, 2000. We had a colonial building in Srinagar which was housing Government Arts Emporium. This building was a reference point for Srinagar because this was the first colonial building constructed in Srinagar for the residence of the resident of British rule, colonial masters. And British resident was appointed in Kashmir somewhere in 1885. And it was 1902, 1903 when this residency came. It was a beautiful building, colonial building, huge lawns, as you know, the English setting of a colonial building. They replicated it all over the country. They also did it in Kashmir. It was on the banks of the river. In 1947, after the departure of resident after independence, this building was given to the Handicrafts Emporium. Again,
Okay.
there's a reason behind that. Most of the trade of Kashmir handicrafts was going through Rawalpindi Road via Lahore, via Punjab, because that was the easiest access out of Kashmir. And
Hmm.
47 partition closed that up. We didn't have access to that area. So craft suddenly accumulated, and there was a situation where people didn't know how to go out and sell and where to go. So this was the first step in the independence of the country, that they said that we will make it a statement. And the
Hmm.
statement is that resident's house, who was almost the ruler's house, will be an emporium selling crafts. So that is how it came up. In 1999, the building got burned in a fire, devastating fire. It was a wood cum brick structure, not much was left out of it. And somehow we thought that we'll miss this building in the landscape of Srinagar. This building must come up. And we heard that this can be restored. Bureaucracy didn't know much about restoration and heritage. They knew about heritage, but they didn't know the technologies of rebuilding, reconstructing. So we went to Delhi and met Intact chairman. I happened to know him in one of my postings in Delhi. I have also worked with Festivals of India in 85. I was working with the Government of India Ministry of Textiles. He was a development commissioner, and I knew where he is. He was is perhaps one of those bureaucrats who should be known and who will live as promoters of handicrafts, promoters of heritage, intangible heritage. He was also the chairman in TAC for a long time. Because of my connection with him in 80s, I went to him and told him, and he gave a solution. He said, we will construct this building the way it used to be before it was burnt, and then the story started. The project was given to Intec. I was not in Intec, I was in the government. I only knew Mr. S.K. Misra, who was that time chairman Intec. And
Yeah.
Intec did a wonderful work out of that reconstruction. The building was recreated on the basis of photographs. There are no drawings available. The drawing, again, is a later day phenomenon, at least in my part of the world. So, on the basis of photographs, Intec reconstructed that building, Intec Delhi. And that's how this relationship may evolve. And that is how I thought that we will need to do something much more, in fact, much more than saving one building. We have to save a kind of, you have to save that setting, urban setting, or
Yeah.
save those technologies by saving these buildings. There's a bigger purpose. You have to preserve history through the monument, through brick and stone. So that's how it happened. So there was a building which was a provocation. But not just the building, because then we started on listing of buildings. We in 2004, in while I was DG Tourism, that's when we started doing listing of the heritage of buildings. And in Srinagar, we did the first cultural source mapping, and we not only listed the buildings, which is a standard pro forma of intact. We
Hmm.
also, as an addition, documented the building fixtures, elements of architecture, elements of craft in that building. And
Hmm.
a major portion of that cultural source mapping, which is a publication now, includes not just the buildings where you have the standard intact format where you name the building, you do condition assessment, you give some history, all those things. You also say the reuse of building or adaptive reuse. We edit this part, what all architectural elements are in that building and how we can make that part of the pro forma. Was that we attached photographs, lots of photographs of elements. So that is how the whole thing evolved. But coming back to the original question, that was there a building? Yes, there was a building.
There was the building. So, transitioning from a high ranking government official to running an NGO like Intech must be a massive shift for you. In the government, you had the authority. In conservation, you often have to beg for attention. What was the hardest part of that transition? Did you have to unlearn being an bureaucrat? Or what was the story?
Well, this is a process, an evolution, how one grows. There are people who remain bureaucrats and find it difficult, but there are people who have taken to, I mean, I have my own kind of landmarks to follow. I have my own people who I know who were bureaucrats and worked. in this sector. I know from handicrafts, I know from textile. I have worked in textiles with Government of India, also in state government. I was director and managing director of handlooms for quite some time. And in
Yeah.
Government of India, I was working as deputy director. When was that? 86, 87. So Deputy Development Commissioner Handicrafts. So I have seen people who had been in government and then they moved out and started their own NGOs. Some started companies. So it's not, there's nothing fixed about it. It's all up in your mind how fixed you are. If you have
Yeah.
an aptitude to do this, it happens to you. I can assure you. And it's not difficult to see that in a change situation, you have to work differently. But the other thing is that in government, there's nothing straitjacketed. In government, there are all these complexes where you have to unlearn something in one department and learn in another department. There's a lot of variety and diversity even in government jobs.
Yeah.
It is, and there are government officers, bureaucrats who work very well in sectors like crafts, in sectors like agriculture, in sectors like environment. So they also, even in the government, there are things when you, even while you are in the government, you have to unlearn things. So part of the process, part of growing up. That's how it happened.
This sounds very interesting. You once said the to effect change, one must work from within. Now that you work from the outside as a conservationist, do you feel you have more freedom to speak the truth about the crumbling heritage?
Well, I wouldn't say that one has more freedom and all. The issue is at a different level, and I would like to flag it here.
Yeah.
A broker is part of a system, part of a society, and he has to be on board on all these concepts. Where does that knowledge or that feeling or even those sensitivities come from? These come from education system.
Mm.
And our education system had lost moorings. I don't know if we have been able to reestablish them. That you belong to a place, like you are, but you are not just a resident. You are also a repository, and these
Mm.
are the essentials of a place which you should keep in mind. They are communities. They are their skills, their history, their traditions, there's knowledge. Some of there was a departure in our education system post 50s, I would have thought so. I can't go back because I don't know people who have been there earlier. They had no idea about things. So there was kind of a gap which was created. But we had people who would have thought the same way as a conservation architect. What does a conservation architect do? He or she is fulfilling a responsibility. But that's not outside of the society or community. That is something which is within the community. So if
Yeah.
you are educated in a particular year or a period, people who are staying with you also are of the same million, of the same mind, and knowledge bank should remain the same. The question is, how do you draw it? Unfortunately, there were departures. So that lack of awareness is an issue in certain sections, and they are fairly well represented in bureaucracy as well. They are not as aware as they should have been. Like if you see societies, I would have thought UK is one of the best examples. The education system allows everybody to pick up these concepts, so that by and large they gel well while they are working in different situations. Here it is slightly different. A broker thinks that this is not something which pertains to him or which is his responsibility as well. What does a conservation architect do? He provides you technology to do it. He doesn't give you a concept. He is not supposed to create a concept. Here you have to fill up both roles. I can see conservation architects convincing people that building should be saved. In fact, saving building should be a societal requirement, demand, or an aspiration. Conservation
Mm.
architect would fill up that gap, how to do it. But here he or she has to do multiple things. First, tell me that this is very important for you. This is very important for your survival, very important for your history, very important for your community. And now this is how we do. Some responsibility should have flown from the person itself or from the system itself. But system somehow was outside of the education what he had got over a period of time. That is my feeling. Because I have been in that era of enlightenment when nothing much was happening, an era of, I wouldn't call it darkness, but an era when we departed. We didn't give much of a credence to it. But then we started off later. Tell me, Jana, 84 intact started. And at that point in time, this country did not a single conservation architect
Yeah.
as of 84. Now you talk of, ask for a conservation architect, there are many who have
Yeah.
established themselves, who have things to, who have delivered things, but go back to 84. There's nothing such, no such thing which was happening. 84. Intact started in documenting in 88, 89 out of blue. It was Romy Khosla, was not a conservation architect who started the whole thing.
Hmm.
Scholarships of York came in handy. Charles Walls and others, we have a huge fund of conservation architects who have done fantastic work now. But go back to that time. Where were they? But that didn't mean that we should not have, we didn't have a conservation setup here, a conservation knowledge center here. We should have imbibed something from the system. Sadly, it was not in the system, and I feel sad about it. One should have
Yeah.
known it. I should have known it in my senior school. That this is something which needs to be done. You should have also known it. My path was different, your path was different, but at some point in time we would meet. So here the debate is still going on. Should we or should we not? This unsettled. Don't think because you people are around, you people
Yeah.
talk to the same mentality. Everybody agrees with you because you agree with them. But there are people
Hmm.
outside the world also who think that this is something which is not very important. So, I mean, cutting the long story short, a systemic failure has
Hmm.
to be first identified, then
Yeah.
worked at. I believe there are now, there's a thinking exoch है जिसमें ये सारी चीजें हो रही हैं. It will take its own time. But the good news is that we are marching ahead. We are people who work and work in mission mode, both in private sector and some in government also, but disproportionately in private sector. There should be many more in governmental setup also. I have worked with National Monuments Authority, which is perhaps not mentioned here, the whole time member. And
Hmm.
National Monuments Authority is an apex statutory body. I was
Hmm.
also the chairman of the authority. And we have been talking to community because we dealt with people. What we were doing was we were making laws for monuments. What all you can do and what all you cannot do while you live around the monuments. The degree of resistance from these people, and for good reasons, is enormous. They see no sense in protecting a space or a buffer between a monument and the people living around. They see no sense in it
Hmm.
because lack of awareness. We were in a regulatory setup. We were making laws and disallowing people. We're not able to carry conviction substantially. Some people obviously are. To tell them that what we are doing is something which is important to you as well, to a
Yeah.
degree. If for nothing, at least the dignity of living in a historic area.
Yeah.
That is what one has been seeing and feeling around.
When we are talking about people, I would like to talk about the Ali Masjid restoration. It was a landmark project because you refused to use the modern cement and went back to the traditional lime mortar. How difficult was it to convince the authorities or the locals to trust the ancient methods over the modern strong materials?
Well, Ali Masjid is a landmark. There's no doubt about it. It is the first conservation project which was undertaken in Kashmir. Unfortunately, ASI monuments maintained by ASI also were not treated on sound conservation principles. So this was one of the first projects. I was in the government those days. I was the director of tourism, so there's no issue of convincing government because
Oh, okay.
I was there. But there were issues. It was not an issue of concrete versus lime only. There
Mm-hmm.
were technological
Yeah.
issues which could not have been addressed because people didn't know about it. one of the main issues, this was an abandoned mosque, a 14th century mosque, which was closed for about 40 years. And then,
Hmm.
our people in the whole of the subcontinent, then you attach stories, create mythologies. So they said that there's कोई जिन आ रहे हैं अंदर भूत प्रीत हैं इसमें. So they stopped going. The actual problem was the moisture ingress in the mosque. It
Hmm.
was on a close close to a wetland. So there was a lot of moisture and water level was very high. It must have not have been there when it was constructed, but then rivers change directions, water table changes. And there was a lot of ingress of moisture. And we live in a place where you need some flooring because of the cold weather. So they use flooring of maybe carpets or maybe something, some wooden flooring to cover the floor so that they could offer prayers. But that
Hmm.
floor would not live beyond a year because of the moisture. Or at times you would not even be able to use the mosque. There was a issue of technology how to fight this ingress of moisture so that it
Hmm.
becomes operationable or if you are able to offer prayers there. We got that technology per chance from somebody who is a conservation architect who has worked in Turkey in similar situations. An American architect he spent an year and a half with us on this project. So he gave us the technique that you should use brick, you should use porous brick, and you should allow the moisture to evaporate. You don't cover it regularly, cover it only when you need the space. So that's one issue. Not
Ah.
much resistance in the government because that time, in a way, for this particular project, I was the government. But the problem was convincing the engineers. They always thought that cement is something which is strong, one, which has a longer life. It sets quickly. So they had always thought that cement is something which should be used as a preferential binding material or material for construction. So nothing
Hmm.
against lime, but they always thought lime cracks, forgetting that it was basically our technology of using the lime, our skills of lime using,
Yeah.
because we didn't know how to do a proper lime mixture. We didn't even have proper lime. Kashmir is the one of the largest repository of limestone, and we
Hmm.
produce cement. And our limestone is chemical grade limestone. In a advanced country, there would be no cement from Kashmir because that would go for make of chemicals. But for want of money and technology, they converted it to cement. But the
Hmm.
same place didn't have a proper lime slagging procedure. So we didn't know. We didn't get good lime. So they didn't realize that if at some point where they had used the lime mortar, it had not survived, was problem with the mortar, not with per se the material. So that is
Hmm.
another area which has to be addressed. And some of these artisans, especially the masons, had this mental block that what we are doing perhaps will not survive. But that is where the training came in. We spent some time with them. In fact,
Yeah.
we had 4 training sessions for a group of masons to tell them how to do a good line, and then showing them examples of historic buildings even in Srinagar which have survived more than 200 years. So where
Yeah.
is the point? In fact, those days we were doing a national highway. Not we, the government was doing a national highway, and there was a brick bridges, culverts, and we took these masons to the culverts to tell them how difficult it is to break this culvert because it's so strong in the line. The same culvert in concrete would perhaps have been quicker in dismantling, but we couldn't do that for a brick and mortar culvert. So it took some time convincing them, but end of the day, everybody was satisfied and happy about what they learned, and we were happy that we got a finally restored, properly conserved building. It was also mentioned in the Aachen list of buildings for that year.
Hmm.
Or yeah, that is what it. So this is basically some technology, some convincing around, some link to past, and
Hmm.
some observations which should be which to which these artists, especially masons, should be exposed. And
Yes.
other part was that the engineers who implement projects are of the same conviction that it is concrete which has life. It's not that.
Yeah.
One of the engineers perhaps thought that that lime no longer exists around, forgetting that lime is a natural resource. It will remain the same whenever it's available.
Yeah.
So you can't have a line in 19th century which is different than the lime in 20th century. That doesn't happen. The basic material remains the same.
It's so true, so true. So when you worked on the Oat Kadhal in the middle of Dal Lake, the logistics must have been a nightmare, I think. Can you share a behind the scenes story of the problem that seemed unsolvable on that project?
There are two issues in it. In fact, whatever we are saying, I always keep on saying there are two issues in it. The first issue is that why did we pick up Unt Kadam? What was so great about it? Because this was, in any case, an abandoned bridge, even if it would have been
So we
dismantled.
lost you.
Then came the restoration. So this bridge was important in historic terms. That is part of the landscape of the Mughal gardens, like larger cultural landscape where you have a mountain on the foothills of mountains, a garden. Then there's the lake, and in the
Mm.
lake this bridge existed. Now the importance of the lake or the location of the lake is very strategic. This garden, especially the Nishad garden, it
Yeah.
opens like a book to you when you cross this bridge. This bridge, the road on which this bridge existed was removed much earlier, 30
Okay.
years earlier, because they
Okay.
thought this is obstructing the flow of water in the lake, which perhaps is true. But bridge they had kept on. So
Okay.
the whole thing was that when you cross this bridge, you would suddenly see this mountain landscape opening up to you as a book. So that was the significance of this bridge for the lake and for the gardens. So that is one element which we wanted that this is something which should be preserved. And then preserving it is a huge challenge because it was in the water.
Yeah.
Happily, I will tell you that most of the sense of doing brick, stone and mortar work in water came from the traditional masons. We were lucky to have two, three traditional masons who had done a similar bridge way back 20 years back in a wetland. So they said
Okay.
that it's possible to stop the water. Some dewatering is required, but this is achievable in a
Hmm.
lake. You can create a buffer, create an obstruction for the water to go closer to the foundation and then do the foundation. And in any case,
Okay.
the stones have to be without binding material. You have to put them because water has to flow between the stones and not disturb the stones. And there's not huge pressure or the force of the water. It is a by and large static, stagnant water. So no currents are coming which would push them out. So it was a technology which was already there. Perchance, a stroke of luck, that we had craftsmen, we had masons. It was very easy for our architects to handle them and convince them and then do the technical part, which is something very essential. And I must tell you, the conservation knowledge in the country is fantastic now. I think what our conservation architects all over the country, in fact, there's a fraternity. You consult them and they consult you. Have picked up ideas from each other in a manner that whatever they have not done earlier, they find people who have already done it, and
Yes.
knowledge flows to and fro. I mean, I wouldn't find a gap in it's a question of reaching the correct people. It is not that people are not available. So people were
Correct.
available. People were
Correct.
available. Let me tell you that. So
That's
a happy
that's
situation because finally this project came through. It was a
yes.
German embassy grant basically on which we were doing it. They had kept a very close eye on it, very close.
Yeah, they are
You
funding.
the German discipline of financing, funding. If you don't spend this money within this month, then this money goes away from you.
Oh.
Yeah, you can see. In quarter, we had to surrender some money because they said that we had made a commitment that this money will be spent in this quarter. But in our
Oh.
own settings, we don't bother much about it. We say, okay, if we did not do in this quarter, we'll do it in next quarter. They said, no, that's not all. So this part will not be given to you because you were not. because there's an inbuilt discipline, especially with Germans. You can't take liberties with them on this, and well, they don't take excuses. So that is
True.
the situation. It was a happy experience working with them, and also a good feeling that there were people who had already worked on something like this. Otherwise, it's not something very easy. In a
Yeah.
lake with water all around, you have to do a plinth of brick. Sorry, a plinth of stones. Okay, the other important thing is that you need a stone mason also who knows how to place it, how to do dry masonry. That's
Right.
not something very dry masonry is not just masonry without binding. It's also how you place a stone over a stone, what surfaces, what angles, what weights, what widths. So it's complex kind of a situation where this knowledge comes traditionally only to those masons who have worked on these projects. So we didn't have many projects, but we had two experienced persons who knew how to do it. So this
Finding
was a
the
construction on which there were no caterpillars or bulldozers picking up stone. There were boats around.
yeah.
So it was boat and stone situation. So
That
no
sounds so
heavy
amazing.
machinery available or used. No heavy machinery. Nothing
That is
mechanized. Nothing mechanized.
that is so amazing that doing a project without the new technologies,
Yeah.
machinery. Yeah. And Kashmir being Kashmir, I just felt like has faced conflict for many decades. In the place where, people are worried about the basic survival and safety. How do you convince a community that saving an old shrine or the bridge for the matter? I mean, how does heritage becomes relevant to their livelihood?
Well, then you have to look at a broader picture. The advantage of being in Kashmir is that you learn a lot how these things happen. It was a very extraordinary situation. But for these monuments, especially where protection is required, community treats it as their own asset. There's a
Yeah.
community ownership for these things. So that is there's an inherent system. I know what lots of wooden buildings around. Most of our shrines are wood based. And
Hmm.
over and above wood, we have a lot of paint which goes into paper mache in these buildings. And what kind of a wood? A deodar oily wood which
Hmm.
has been sun soaked for 200 years. So a small flare could result in disaster, which happened in one or two places. One was
Yeah.
very intentional, one was not intentional, one was accidental. Anyway, so community ownership is very important. So these buildings belong to institutions, a work board, a government organization, but the ownership was of the people. So they were first guardians about this. That is
Hmm.
about monuments. But overall, I'll tell you, somebody has to work on it. Kashmir refused to get defeated by the turmoil. They faced the worst kind of turmoil, killings, lockdowns, educational disruption, but they refused to surrender to violence. I don't
Hmm.
know, many places would be doing that. I don't know. I'm not very sure. I was on a webinar, I was on a conference yesterday where we were
Hmm.
talking about militancy. So I was telling them that militancy has two aspects. One aspect is what's the violence, the other aspect is mansikta.
Huh.
And Kashmiris had that mansikta to fight it out. How they did it is a long story, and they were able to do it. So that is how the community survived, and most of these assets survived. Our bigger challenges came post militancy urbanization challenges, where
Yeah.
demolitions took place, where people started removing old buildings. Though there was, we are the first state which passed a heritage preservation bill in 2010, drafted by INTAC in legislature.
Hmm.
There are heritage guidelines, there are heritage model guidelines, there are state government standing instructions, different ways. But there are not many states which pass a comprehensive bill. Ours is the only comprehensive bill which in the same bill gives status of preservation and conservation to buildings as they give to the handicrafts, as they give to the intangible heritage. So there are laws which protect heritage in this country, and enough of them in most of the states. But our law gives protection just not to the building, but also to the paper mache in the building, independent of the building. Is identified as something which is a standalone fixture which needs to be protected. So, by and large, it has been, as I said, possible because it was the people who thought that
Hmm.
this is something which should not happen to us. And
Yeah.
things have been very bad. So, when we returned to the normalcy, so it was a
Hmm.
combined effort, and the major contribution in the effort was the mentality, was the mansikta of people of Kashmir, that they wanted to come back to normal life. And they did.
Sounds inspiring.
They did.
You were very instrumental in getting Srinagar the UNESCO Creative City tag. This linked heritage directly to commerce and craft, and I'm very curious to know what was the strategic move that to make people realize that heritage equals to money or jobs.
Well, we always thought that, I mean, as you know, as the whole world knows, it was already known that Kashmir is a huge kind of a place where crafts are practiced. It has
Yeah.
very rich tradition of handicrafts. In fact, Kashmir shawl is something where the raw material doesn't come from Kashmir, it comes from China and Ladakh. It is known as
Hmm.
Kashmir shawl because Kashmiris processed it. But it has, I mean, we could always find that it had been somehow diluted at a level where it looked like a commerce or merchandise. It didn't it didn't get that pedestal where you
Hmm.
appreciate the art of weaving. It became a
Yeah.
product which has various elements. It has raw material, it has wool, it has thread, it has also some embroidery on it. So we wanted this status to be granted to it and known as something which is in the realm of arts. It's
Hmm.
not that we only found it. If you know, the Kashmir shawl has been defined by Kamala Deviji that finest of the arts after miniatures in India. Now imagine the miniature painting, a Shahnama,
Hmm.
Akbarnama, Shireen Farhad, which sells in billions now. Kamala Devi ji equated Kashmir shawl next to that. So there was this feeling amongst the craft administrators and craft historians that Kashmir shawl or Kashmir handicraft is something more than a merchandise, more than something which you like as a product or as a fashion. There's a lot of history around it. But we have been thinking, I mean, I have been, as I told you, in handicrafts. That was my 30th year in the handicraft, having joined the handicraft section as special secretary in the government. We've been thinking of doing this. What do you do? Publicity? Tell people is that we were doing participation in fairs. Yes, we were doing participation in fairs. But we still continued by and large as a state which sells merchandise, which sells good shawls. That's all. It
Hmm.
didn't raise the level, didn't create the buzz. So this UNESCO cities, UNESCO Heritage Cities Network, or
Hmm.
sorry, UNESCO Creative Cities Network came in. And they had not dealt with crafts like they did in films, they did music in Varanasi, things like that. So we
Hmm.
thought this is a platform where we must find place. We should be treated the way music is treated.
Yeah.
We should be treated like these hymns or chants, or Buddhist chants are created or recognized. So
Yeah.
we worked for it. We worked for it for quite some time. There's a lot of politics in UN system, and that
Hmm.
starts from our own country to reach there.
Reach them.
We first applied and we could see that people agreed with what we were saying. I had presented it there, but finally the decision was for something else. So there's a lot of politics in systems also. But we were very sure that we have to be somewhere closer to music, closer to arts, than a merchandise or something which gives you warmth. And that happened. I don't want to bother you with integrity or details, how we did it, where we did it, what we did, but we did a very good presentation and a dossier which was appreciated independent of the scale. That the
Hmm.
documentation was such. And that happened because it was already there. It was there. We
It
did
was
produce
always.
shots. We did produce museum pieces which you would have found in Victoria and Albert Museum that was still being woven here. So we thought saw no reason why we should not be there. It happened, but it happened in second attempt, not the first attempt.
Okay, okay. That I was not aware. So sir, you have always been very vocal about the dangers of concrete, calling it a big danger to the Kashmir's seismic stability. Yet
Mhm.
everyone wants a concrete house today. So, as an expert, like how do we bridge this gap between the aspiration and wisdom? Like I personally have seen this at a lot of places where I'm doing my research work, particularly in the vernacular architecture. So this this is really important that how can we bridge that gap? And
Well, as you said, we are in the fourth schedule of seismic zones, and we are located in a very fragile area and very have been facing earthquakes. We faced the last earthquake during my time was in 2005 when we
hmm,
lost buildings all over the Kashmir. There was more there were more deaths in other part of Kashmir, which is the occupied part of Kashmir by Pakistan. Deaths were there, and there the deaths were because of the concrete. The
oh
school building, the earthquake took place at about 9 a.m. That's when the school started. School building, most of the deaths were of children because faulty constructions. Anyway, we knew that earthquake is something which is not new to Kashmir.
yeah,
So we had over a period of centuries, who and when that I don't know, evolved a technology of facing earthquake. Not only in Kashmir, I'm told Japan has the same situation. In Turkey, there was the same situation. So we had called this Daji Diwari, the timber
huh,
frame structures, which are earthquake proof. And Kashmiris had really mastered this timber based framing structure. It didn't
yes,
look like a timber based structure, it looked like a proper building with bricks, with stone, essentially a timber based structure. And so that is one style or typology which was prevailing all over Kashmir. The other typology was the Tak system, which is creating a situation where you have these pillars with most of the cases with mud binding or for a better house lime binding. So we keep it plain, then you infill. So that was the Tark system. And this technology everybody knew was earthquake resistant. And it worked well with us till late 90s, sorry, late 60s. Worked very well with us. And all these new constructions which happened till 60s, late 60s, would
hmm,
be a Tark system. And as you have been working in vernacular architecture, you would have known that system. It only happened after that. People thought, people started using for matters of convenience and also thinking that is a better material, we went to concretes. So I don't think we can run away and go back to Daji Diwari and Tak system now. But what we are doing is that we are not adopting the techniques which are required for a concrete earthquake setup, even at the elementary level. I can tell you, I was part of a UN study on post earthquake. With in fact, Rajendra Desai did a lot of work,
hmm,
earthquake construction in Kashmir. We have this. I don't know if you have heard his name. Rajendra Desai was one who conducted massive training program in Kashmir for the masons. And what we found, we did a study for UNDP also. What has happened post earthquake structures?
hmm,
Post earthquake structures, were of the same type and quality which were pre-earthquakes. They had already been demolished with one earthquake, and we created a similar structure after that, which is again prone to being destroyed in an earthquake. The issue is proper technology. You can't run away with from this fact that this has become a fact of life that you use concrete. But even for concrete, you have to use proper materials, proper technology, proper binding, earthquake bands, which we have been talking about. They don't do
Yeah,
it. The problem is that we don't only shift from the materials. We also don't pay attention to the technology that is required to make the new construction or a concrete construction earthquake proof. This doesn't happen in Kashmir in most of the shrines. They use the same technology even now, knowing that this has a value. The value is to us earthquake resistant structure. For them, it is something which is traditional. They would do it the same way. They use the das, the timber frame, timber
true.
brace, and then fill it with bricks and use another timber brace, use another timber brace. So the idea is that new technologies you have to adopt, but you don't adopt new technology the way these should be adopted. And the defective older technology would not create a disaster. Defective new technologies create disasters. You have to be very perfect while you use cement proportions. You don't need to be that perfect while you do the vernacular structure. You can allow the structure. Even a
True.
half brick would mean something okay, it can. So that is something which needs to be accepted that the new materials will come, but new materials have to be used on the basis of technologies out of which these new materials have come, and they have to be used in a way as these have been engineered. So we are
Yeah,
talking traditional structures which are unengineered structures. But when you go to the engineering structure, you have to have a different calculus. But who
true.
does that? In a village, that doesn't happen. Might
True.
happen in a cathedral building or a multi-story building. Our worry is that hut of a tribal in Rajouri who thought
Mm,
that he has a new house, forgetting that the other this now new house has the same risk and danger which his old house had. So new house is no security that now it will stand. So
true.
that is, and when you have to do it at a massive scale, then one has to look at these things. Talking about is okay. That is one good thing about this country. We make right noises, but we don't make right decisions. We don't always take right decisions. We always take right noises. We are good at that.
So true, sir, listening to all this. I would like to ask you if you could go back to the M. Saleem Beg of 1975, who just joined the government service, what is the one piece of advice you would give him?
Move with the times. Can't run away from the changing world. But keep your moorings very strong. Remain attached to the world you have come from. Do everything, but do it in sympathy with your past. It will give you great satisfaction. Don't depart. Build on. So that is what I have seen is highly satisfying. If you have a connect with what has been happening in the past, and if you have that sympathy for all that has happened in past, good things that have happened in past, I think you will be very comfortable. So that is the life lesson.
So, such a great lesson we are getting today. So, if I ask you just to have a lighter mood, what's your favorite hidden corner in Srinagar that tourists don't know about?
It's a very small place, and tourists go everywhere. But there's one place which is lesser visited, a small shrine on the banks of River Jhelum where I generally go. Generally spend some time there.
Next time I'm going to go there.
Yeah, I will take you there.
One building in Kashmir you wish you could have saved, but you couldn't.
Yes. There's a colonial building constructed in 1901 or 1902, which was a school, Laldet School,
Okay.
that was demolished because the owners didn't sold it to a real estate person who wanted to do a shopping complex. We didn't allow him to do shopping complex, but we lost the building. We lost the fight to save the building. But we didn't. We went to the court and we persuaded the government that he should not be allowed to. We should. This building should be acquired, and we converted that into a cultural center, but in a new building, not in the old building. The old building was something
Oh,
different. Old building
good.
was demolished. I'll show you the slides as and when we get the chance of seeing what the old building was, what connect that old building had with the river. It's not just a building, it's the
Hmm.
whole setting of that building. The entry for the building was not from the road, was from the river.
Oh, that
Yeah.
sounds so interesting.
And only access to the road was through a gate through which a horse would go to the first floor. It was such a wide
Oh,
building.
oh,
Fantastic. Done in 1901 by somebody who then passed away. He gave it to Hindu Education Society. They ran a school there. Then they constructed another building, left the school unattended. And that's how it was demolished. We had intervened pre-demolition also, but we couldn't succeed. The court didn't decide in time, and meanwhile it was demolished. And then it fell because of the law and order disturbances there. Those who purchased it took advantage of the disturbances and demolished. But then we persuaded the government, it was acquired. No new building was, we had to construct a one floor where which we established a cultural center. So that's one building I would always miss. I had been going there before it was demolished, something out of this world. You would understand Kashmir, Srinagar urban setting by one
yeah.
building, and that was this building. Just going to the building, you would know what the place would, what the riverfront would have been, because Srinagar riverfront is very famous for the art,
Yes.
everything. So
So
this
what
is
do
one
you
define. Anyway, sorry, you're
what do
asking
you
something.
prefer, the lime mortar or the cement?
But in places like Srinagar, I think lime mortar is something which should be promoted in a big way. I
Hmm.
don't say that it should replace mortar, but it should be promoted in a big way. It has fantastic advantages for us. We have done it in most of the restoration works. We have done even in gardens, and we have found it fantastic. And lime has better survival in water than the cement.
Cement. So true.
Though
So
our
true.
people feel that no, because there has to be water around, it has to be cement. That's not true. Even in technological terms, not much work has been done in comparing lime with cement. The reason is how long we have been using cement. I mean, the only place where we have cement in abundance is Chandigarh. And we
Yeah.
don't know how it ages, how it performs after 100 years. We don't know that. I mean,
True.
popularly not known. Maybe you people, you are experts, you would be knowing
No,
in your books.
it's not known to anyone, sir. I don't know why people are shifting. I have been working in Assam
Mm.
and I've seen that same scenario.
Huge advantage, huge advantage.
Yes, yes,
In
yes.
terms of quality of construction, also, you may not be doing a multi-story building, but you don't need to do multi-story buildings everywhere. That's not happening. In my place, it's not happening. Then you do two plus stories. So I can understand cement and brick and steel being used in a multi-story building, but you do the same thing for single stories, two-story buildings.
Yeah,
Then you
it's
would be
not
very
required.
comfortable. And the other advantage for places like Srinagar for this lime is the climate.
True.
It is the ambient temperature in a room done out of brick and lime is much better than in cement.
Yes.
Now, a common refrain in Kashmir is that we have lots of orthopedic problems in Kashmir with people, which must be happening in other parts of the country. But in our place, these ladies generally say it's because of cement that you have got problems.
It is actually there in many parts of India. Like I have been
Mm.
working in Kutch, I have been working in Assam, and I have seen these changes in the vernacular architecture majorly because I work more into that, and I've seen that people are shifting to cement, and I would say that some places it is actually not required, as you mentioned, like one story, two story. You don't actually really need it. Our
Indeed.
construction is really amazing. The traditional techniques are so amazing, and actually, we are losing it. As you said, as we discussed today, that finding someone who knows that technique was. the, the luckiest part of the project. So, all other things can be done, but to find someone who still knows how to do
I
it,
agree. I agree with
this
you.
has become so difficult. Like, it is our knowledge which was always there, and now it is so difficult to find someone who knows it. And I would say, like, really, this was an eye opening for Kashmir. Like, I've been many times to Kashmir, I've not seen it through that perspective actually. But yes, it is very beautiful. And so everyone admires the beauty of it. And it's just the last question I want to know. If you weren't a heritage man, what would you be?
I would be a teacher.
Huh?
A teacher. Yes.
Yes, your students would love you.
No,
You
but I
would
would.
have amazing
Given
teachers.
another chance, I would be a teacher. I don't know if I'm an heritage man. This is something coined by this local media, but if I have a
Yeah,
chance, I think
it is
I
there,
will.
sir. If you Google yourself, the first line comes as the heritage man. It
It's like
feels
an
amazing to us.
imagination of somebody.
It's amazing to us, and it's so amazing to have you on this platform as for the first episode itself.
Thank
And
you.
this was an incredible conversation, and we got to learn so many things, which actually, as you said, the education system, we
Yeah,
actually don't learn the Indian architecture, culture, history
we don't.
in a in the way we have.
We do, but we don't do it in the terms in which you and me discussed it. Generally, we do. We are an ancient civilization, which we are. But that
Yes,
takes you nowhere. So
yes.
talk about things which happen, change on the ground, and see what all can be retained. And if that is retained, then you have to have instruments to retain that.
Correct. Correct. So true, sir. So true.
Yeah.
It was an amazing
Thank you.
conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so
I
much
was
for
very
being
happy
here.
talking to you.
Same here, sir. Same
Thank
here.
you.
This
Thanks a
was
lot. So you're doing it on a YouTube, on YouTube now? It will be transferred on YouTube.
yes, sir. It's